This is a Guide Your Light Network production, creating podcasts with purpose.
The first step then is self-awareness. So aware that we're in a bad place, aware that life sucks, aware that we're feeling all these horrible emotions. Once we're aware of it and we own it, it's actually loving yourself.
Welcome to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast. I'm your host, Morrison. Get ready to hear moments that will help you to see the world differently and inspire you to become the happiest, healthiest, and kindest version of you. Today, we're diving into a conversation that truly feels like sitting with a wise woman around a warm fire. The kind of talk that softens you, expands you, and shifts you at the same time. My guest today is the incredible Kim Morrison, award-winning author, coach, mentor, founder of 28 Essentials, and the host of the Self-Love podcast. And she's one of the most grounded, heart-led humans you will ever meet. Kim has lived many lives: the athlete, the entrepreneur, the mother, the seeker. But what makes her so extraordinary are not these titles. It's the depth, it's the honesty, and it's the way she turns life's hardest chapters into openings, learnings, and light. In this conversation, we explore some of the big questions that shape our experience of being human. Don't forget to follow the show and keep the conversation going. Join me on Instagram or share your comments with us on Spotify or on YouTube if you're watching there. Welcome, Kim Morrison, to the Things You Can't Unhear podcast.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, darling. It's good to be here.
Oh, I'm so pleased you're here. We've had a chat on your podcast as well, the Self-Love podcast. And you are a master interviewer. So how does it feel being on the other side of the mic today?
I think it's more nerve-wracking on
Definitely.
this side. I'd rather be on your side. It's interesting. And because your conversations and our conversations are so free-flowing, I think that's what makes it easier. It's not staged. I think that's what's so beautiful.
Now, you've been in the podcasting game yourself for quite some time, and we were talking just before we hit record about just how long you have been in the game. How many episodes have you recorded on the Self-Love podcast?
In the 2 shows that I have up for a chat in the Self-Love podcast, nearly 1,000.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And how did it all start? The tech has changed since then, hasn't it, Kim?
Started with a beautiful cup, a coffee cup, and the iPhone turned upside down and pressed record.
How do you feel when people listen to that first episode?
Well, there was always complaints. As it advanced, there was complaints about the sound, but they loved the quality information. Yep. So, look, I think we've advanced so much now that a lot of the people we interviewed at the beginning potentially now I've either re-interviewed or it's a new era.
Yeah, it's funny. I look at my analytics sometimes with my podcast, and I looked recently and a couple of people had been listening to episode 1 from 2019, and I was like, oh, don't listen to that. What are you listening to that?
It's like when you hear musicians. I heard Madonna once say that she can't listen to some of her earlier stuff, yet that's the stuff we grew up on.
That's the stuff we love. How do you feel about things like that when you're an author? Because I've always wondered, a lot of people put books out there, and when you write, you're writing from a place that you're currently in. And say you pick up that book 10 years later on and you're a different version of yourself. Rereading that, how does that feel? Does it still resonate? I've always been really curious.
Yeah, it does for me. It does. I look at it, sometimes I'll read and go, God, that's good. And then we've always stated in any of the books that I've written or co-written, we've said this is the time of life that we're in. So when we first launched my first book, our children were babies, still breastfeeding. Then the second edition of that was when they were around 10 to 12. And then the third edition, which I did on my own, my kids were teenagers and nearly 20s. So it's almost like I'm ready for another update. But it's interesting because you do evolve and you learn more. But I think because health is ever evolving, I don't think some of the foundations or principles of health have changed.
You're right. And you live such an embodied lifestyle to what you preach. And I love to see that, and I love to witness it, and following your Instagram recently too, and seeing the way that you work with your children and your relationship with your husband, and getting to know you on a personal level too. It's that full embodiment of what would you even call it? The Kim lifestyle.
I know, because some people say, there's the work Kim, and then there's the play Kim, and then there's the mum Kim. No, with me, what you see is what you get, and potentially that's why some have said it's so authentic and so real. I would find it exhausting to be someone I'm not, or to have a persona or a temperament that was different. I understand why people do that, but no, who I am at home is who I am on a show, is who I am in the workplace, is who I am on stage. So.
It's funny how people view us, I think, as well. One of my best friends who lives in Melbourne, she called me a couple of days ago and said, "Oh, so what are you doing?" "Oh, no, my partner asked what you were up to." And I said to him, "Oh, probably something healthy." And I said, "What?
Yeah.
What do you mean?" And she said, "Oh, what are you doing though?" And I said, "I'm having a walk on the beach." She said, "See, healthy." I said, "But 10 minutes before this, I was yelling at my children for doing something wrong. So don't worry, life's all about balance."
And humanness. We're not always perfect, and we're not always bad.
Exactly. Now, you're known as the self-love guru. When did the journey of self-love awareness come into your life? And before we even touch on that, let's identify what self-love actually is. Because when I was growing up, when people would say things like, "Oh, she loves herself," or, and it was seen as a negative thing, this is a completely opposite thing to that egoic term of, loving yourself, as we were hearing when we were younger. Tell me what it actually means to you.
Well, I have done nearly 500 interviews, and every one of them I ask my listener, the person I'm interviewing, what is your definition of self-love? And I can honestly say to you, Maritza, not one of them is the same. So I think it's a very personal interpretation. I think what you're alluding to, when we're young and when our kids are little, we want them to embody self-love. In fact, they're walking, talking beacons of self-love, because they are egocentric as children. It is all about them. There is nothing else. And that's the beauty of it. But an 8-year-old saying, look at me, I'm amazing, and all of that is beautiful. When we go through school or we get subjected to different environments, you act like that, and then you're told you're up yourself if you love yourself. So then self-love becomes almost a negative connotation. And then potentially through those teenage years, we lose ourselves, or we're not sure how. Well, I've always felt there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And I guess that's where, if you're authentic and stay in your heart, you can't help but exude what it means to love oneself. If you do go into the egoic state as an adult or a young adult, then I guess that's when pretenses or falsenicity, that's a new word, comes out. And so I think it's really, for many people over the years of interviewing them, it is, the definition of it in the dictionary is the divine responsibility to take care and honour oneself. But many people will say it's being true, it's being authentically you, it's loving who you are, warts and all. It's being your truth, it's standing in your example of what it means to be the best version of you. So I think it's beautiful, because self-love has such a different interpretation. And I'd even say it has a different perspective based on where you're at in your life. If you feel, dare I say it, fat and frumpy, you're probably not going to feel like you love yourself very much. But if you've just gone through a weight loss protocol or a fitness protocol, dare say you're going to stand in front of the mirror, no matter what your size or shape, and be championing that because it took work. I would like to say that it is an ongoing process to continuously search for and honour loving oneself, because there are times we do stupid things, or we say dumb things, or we hurt people, or we think
bad things about ourselves.
That's probably the worst one.
Yeah.
What goes on between our head and how we think about ourselves, that's a bit scary if that was broadcasted to the world, and I'm guilty of that too.
I think we all are, and don't quote me on these statistics, but it was around 80. We have 80,000 thoughts per day, and I think about 75 to 80% of them are negative.
They can be, yeah. I think if you work on yourself,
and that's
if
exactly
you understand the process of what it means to really work out who the heck you are, and you do the self-discovery and look at this beautiful journey as a lifelong discovery. It's not just an 8-week course or a 4-year degree or a 5-year journey in motherhood. It is the whole journey. And when you speak to women in their 70s, 80s and 90s, it's the stuff that we think really matters when we're young. I think because the way a lot of them have described to me that when you start to realise there's only so many summers left in your life, you start to look at it a very big, holistic bird's eye view rather than the intricate moments. And I heard someone say the other day, you know, I've never heard someone at their funeral say, nice person, but she didn't look that good in a bikini. Or great man, but my gosh, he was really driven by his work. It is often the essence of you that we talk about on that day that you go, or the funeral or the celebration of your life. We talk about the beautiful aspects of who you are or what you're about or what your legacy was. So I try and keep that real beautiful, observing bird's eye view when I fall into a hole or things don't feel like they're going well, and just remember, you know, life is like waves and hills and troughs and valleys, and it'd be boring if it was all that.
Yeah.
And then one of my beautiful teachers in India, the 12th Kenting Thai Satupa is his title. He's the educator of Tibetan Buddhist monks. He said, when I asked him, you know, why do humans have to struggle? It's not fair. And he went, ho, ho, ho. Very human question. But he said, my dear, how can you possibly understand the highs without the lows? How could we ever appreciate light without dark? And where on earth would we be without understanding fear to really appreciate love?
Everything must have an opposite for us to truly understand and feel it, right?
Yeah. And we mostly feel it in the downturns. We mostly pay attention when life's not going great. I remember driving down the freeway with my dear grandmother. She moved over here at 90 from New Zealand. So I always say to people, you know, if you think you're too old, But Grandma, she'd always put her hand, you know, on my lap, and she'd say, oh, penny for your thoughts.
My mother-in-law says that too.
It's so cute. And I'd go, oh, I can't talk about this one. And she said, oh, no, darling, you know, a problem shared is a problem half solved. And I said to her, Grandma, this is years ago, I said, Grandma, I've got this terrible, terrible vision. I'm going to have a head-on car accident, because I drive a lot on the freeway and was driving her back to Kingaroy. And she said, oh, that's awful, you poor thing. And I said, and I've just read this book called The Secret. It's all about the law of attraction. And she went, oh, yes. And she said, oh, darling, no. You've got to remember, every one of us has beautiful guiding angels. That's when you'll get a shiver up your spine, or a sign, or anything that just feels really like it kind of brings you to attention. They're your guides talking to you. And when you're not listening to those guides, it's usually the negative thoughts or negative moments. So in this instance, they're just asking you to drive more carefully.
Oh, wow.
So it's not that you're going to have a head-on car accident. They're just saying, be alert. It might not be you. It's just be aware that someone, just watch the road more carefully. And I thought, that is such a beautiful perspective. Whenever I have a negative thought now, ever since that day, I've thought, what are my angels trying to tell me?
Oh, Kim, you don't know how much those words have just helped me, because I've struggled with this too so much when it comes to learning about, like you said, the law of attraction and what we think can be manifest into our lives. And I've always struggled with the idea of having the negative thoughts and how to manage them. And that was just such a beautiful take on that, and flipping that, because your grandmother is right. It is that little message of going, and we can do this throughout our life, flipping the script of what is being said or heard or felt if we're not liking it. But what message can we get from that fear that's popped up from this?
Powerful.
Because it's debilitating having those ongoing fears. It truly is. And I don't think many people speak about them enough, because speaking about them, again, may feel like you're bringing it into existence.
There's a fine line between being your story and becoming a story. So if you've grown up, and I love this analogy too, if you've grown up with parents who, or one parent or someone that you looked up to, you're a dickhead, you're useless, you'll amount to nothing. Potentially you'll believe it and grow into that. If you grew up with someone who said, you're amazing, the world's your oyster, you've got everything happening for you, you could grow up believing that. Now, neither's right or wrong. It's just it brings us back to the realisation we have a choice. When we're young, we may not realise that. But I think one of the greatest gifts as we get older is the realisation we all have a choice. And so whatever the external, significant, emotional event that occurs in front of us or to us, what feels like to us, if we can turn it around and look at it as an opportunity or a learning or a piece of wisdom that's going to come from it, that's the greatest gift of all. But we cannot think that when we're in the middle of lying on the bathroom floor. And the worst thing you could do is go into someone and say, oh, this is a gift. Oh, it's going to be amazing. So another beautiful one of my mentors always said, and she was French and 90, or darling, you have to feel it to heal it. And so if we suppress those negative emotions or negative thoughts, that's just as bad as believing them. So it's a case of, what is true here? And why am I being activated or triggered by this? And I love doing the 7 whys. Why is that affecting me? And I might go, because it's made me angry. Why are you angry over that? Because it really hurts. Why is it hurting you? Because I remember one of my teachers always said that. Why did that teacher play so much significance in your life? I don't know, but it really mattered. Why does it matter now? And you get to the point where we get to a place what we call the root cause. And if we can clear that negative or limiting emotional belief at that point and realise it could have potentially just become a gestalt for every time someone said something negative or hurtful, you weren't good for nothing. Once you clear that at the root cause, it can clear everything, and you realise that was just a decision I made at that time that I was no good, just on one person's opinion.
Right, and we just let it harbour. I think awareness, you're right, is such a key to bringing it back to that self-love and identifying what it is that you had these thoughts about initially and going, actually, it's not that important after all. It's not that relevant to my life right now.
And you can use your story, your history, your childhood, your upbringing as a platform to elevate you or a platform to destroy you. Yeah. There is no in between. It's the idea of each generation is to make the next one better. And I always said that to my kids when I didn't know a maths answer. I don't know that. Well, why don't you know that? Well, because I'm making you more intelligent than me. That's my job.
Such a mum thing, isn't it?
But I remember thinking, there was 2 26-year-old men, twins, interviewed. And forgive me, I can't remember the context or the actual reference point, but it's stayed in my head ever since. But there was 2 26-year-old men interviewed. One was a derelict on social welfare, drug taker, hated on life. The other one, successful entrepreneur, owned 2 properties, had a business, going for life. And when they interviewed them, the 26-year-old derelict, for want of a better description, said, when they asked, why do you think your life's turned out like this? He said, because my father was an alcoholic. And when they interviewed the successful entrepreneur twin brother and said, why do you think you've turned out like this? He said, because my father was an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And that really stayed with me again, back to the power of choice. You can't unhear this stuff when you hear it. And I do believe when you hear certain moments in your life like this and it activates something or you get goosebumps or it's just something you can't unhear, then it's up to you to choose to elevate your life by taking the lessons from that. And maybe that's something I've done naturally all my life and have always felt there's always a learning, there's always an opportunity. And even through the darkest times of my life, and I'm not a big Pollyanna where everything's brilliant and everything's rosy, sometimes I've been on my bathroom floor or absolutely been ripped open. And I still stay in that space of, I know there'll be something out of this. I just can't feel it right now, which takes me to Jacqueline. You have to feel it to heal it. And I think honouring the pains of life rather than discounting or suppressing them, knowing, and I can promise you on the other side of it is always something greater if you stay in, choose to be in the work of elevating yourself out of it. And that may take a coach or a therapist or a counsellor. We don't have to do it alone.
I always say the way you perceive the world directly affects the way that you experience it.
That's so true.
It is. Now, I want to talk about your latest book. What's it called? What's the
The
title?
Art of Self-Love.
The Art of Self-Love. Because I know that there was a story and a journey that led you to writing that book. Can you share that with us today? Because I think there's such a beautiful message in this.
Well, first of all, we moved to Australia because my husband's sister tragically took her life. It completely, I guess, catapulted us all into a place of what the hell. None of us saw it coming. None of us were equipped or were able to really, truly understand it. We weren't psychologists or specialists in this field. And so we all kind of stumbled and fumbled our way through it. And she left 3 beautiful children, and she was such an earth mother and an angel. And so, again, that was where we really got to now, 20 years later, appreciate mental health and things like that. So that's what catapulted us to come here. We decided, when I saw my husband spiralling and all the things we'd been through, our children were only 6 and 7 at the time, Danny sort of said, I don't know what to do to get out of this. And that's when one of our counsellors said, you know what, you can't change your environment, so it might be an idea for you to change the environment you're in. And so we thought, we'd always talked about living in Australia. I've spent a lot of time in Australia, lived in Melbourne and just love it, did a lot of study here in Melbourne, in Australia. And so I said to my husband one day, should we go live in Australia? And he was like, hell yes, when? So we moved over here to the Sunshine Coast. He was interviewed because he played cricket for New Zealand for many years. And he was interviewed, why? Why did you move here? And he said, to put a bit of sunshine back into our lives.
Oh, how beautiful.
So that was going to be a 2-year journey. We haven't gone back. So here we are, 18 years past that 2 years, benchmark. But it was when Jacob, my son, turned, about 14, 15, he was really struggling. Now, as a mum, I just wanted to tell him everything will be fine, he'll be great, life's good, it's a journey. But actually, when you're in the mosh pit of life, hearing that feels empty. And also as a 15-year-old boy, is it your mum that's really got the answers? And so for about 2 or 3 years, I decided to transcribe every guru, every person I've ever looked up to, any podcast that touched me, anything I couldn't unhear. I wrote it all out by hand, and it took me about 2 years. And it was through
this before you
yes.
had these issues. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, this was as he was trying to progress through it. And I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know how to communicate it. I didn't know how to help him. And Jacqueline had also said to me, sometimes we have to let the people we love the most hit rock bottom before they can put both feet on the ground and push themselves back up. That's hard as a wife, a partner, a mother, a sister, whatever. It's hard to watch people you love go there. But we also know that sometimes we have to hit rock bottom before we know what it is we have to do. It's a fine line. And so I was transcribing all these things, and I kept thinking, what could I show him or help him? And so I came up with this 6-step process that just illuminated itself for me. And being an athlete myself, I like a plan, I like a pathway, I like points I can tick off. And he came into my room one night at the age of 16, nearly 17, and he just went, and I knew he was bad, he wasn't in a good place. And he came into me, and Danny was home at this time. He was lying next to me. Taylor, my daughter, who's 17 months older than him, had come into the room, and he goes, I hate my life. Every time I tell the story, I still feel it. And I don't want to be here anymore. And it was probably some of the hardest things I've ever heard. And so a part of me was very much about, I wanted to fix it, but I knew I couldn't. And so I said to him, sweetie, I don't have the answer, but I've come up with this 6-step process, and I don't know if you want to hear it, but I've come up with something that might help. do you want to hear it? And it was the first time he said to me, yeah, I want to hear it. And so I drew on a big piece of paper, which it was my big A3 booklet. It's like an artist's book that I had all these notes in. But I opened up onto a blank page and I drew a big heart in the middle of it. And all four of us were on the bed. And I wrote the words self-love. And I said, what do you think the opposite of self-love is? And Jacob went, hate. And I said, okay, well, I'll put hate, but I think it's bigger than that. I actually think from all the work I've done, it's more fear. And fear, underneath fear, we could put hate, because there's lots of things around being the opposite of self-love. And so I said to them, what do you think it is? And Danny said guilt and shame, and it was remorse or anger or frustration or not good enough or hating on myself or tired, or like all those words that potentially don't have a positive connotation. I said, let's list them here. So I drew a big arrow out of the heart. And then I said, well, once we own that and we see that that's all a part of it, then I went up to the top right of the heart and I said, the first step then is self-awareness. So aware that we're in a bad place, aware that life sucks, aware that we're feeling all these horrible emotions. Once we're aware of it and we own it, it's actually loving yourself, because life isn't always good. Yeah. So when we know that it sucks, that's the first step to loving ourselves, because we know it's not right now. But to move through it and to come back to it, the next step, in my humble opinion, was self-care. Because most people, when we're in a place that sucks, will sabotage further. Don't eat well, don't train, drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, negativity. Like it's fuel. So the first step after awareness is self-care. So I looked at Jake and I said, I want you to drink the green smoothies. I want you to 3 times a week go down to our beach. I'm asking you to run when it feels right, because you're a young man, you're growing, you've got lots of you've got incredible athleticism. We need to work that out and energize ourselves. And then I said the next step, though, is really important, and that's self-discipline. Because you can't just do it once, or, go and have a nice hot bath once. Yeah. And I believe in the 28-day cycle. You've got to do it for 28 days straight. That's what can potentially be a pattern interrupt or a change in behaviour, but you've got to do it for 28 days. And don't worry if you miss a day, you just start again. It's just got to be 28 days to program the neural pathway into honouring ourselves while we're going through a tough time. So discipline is key, and being an athlete, that to me is one of the most important parts. So self-awareness, self-care, self-discipline. That's the doing. You've got to do the work when we're going through a tough time. Then we become the work. So self-control, we have more self-control. We're not going to put things into and onto our bodies that don't help us. We're not going to swear at teachers. We're not going to abuse our family. We're going to have more control about the way we think and do things. With more self-control comes self-respect. And when we really respect ourselves, there's no way we're going to let ourselves be anything other than the best version of us. And with self-respect means that we honour, and there's a beautiful New Zealand Māori word, which is mana. And mana is, and forgive me, I'm not Māori, so this is just me, my interpretation of it, which is seeing the God within, understanding that within each of us is such grace and such power and such strength. And mana is coming home to oneself, knowing where we belong. That's self-respect. And when we have self-respect, the 6th step is self-acceptance. We love who we are, warts and all constraints, all weaknesses, and all the beauty, the grace, and the beautiful power that we are as well. And I just looked at Jake and I said, and that feeds into self-love. And he just looked at me and he goes, Mum, no one's ever explained it like that. You got to write a book. Oh, and I figured if a 16-year-old boy got it, I had to write the book.
You were exactly what he needed at that time. How did he go following those steps?
He was great. He went back to school, didn't swear, didn't do too many things. But I'll be honest, he slipped and eventually was asked to leave that school. So did it work? Well, maybe not. But then it became the foundation for when we found a new school, and he actually ended up being at an even better school, even though the finding of it was tough. And even though there were moments where we clashed and it was breaking us both open, we then ended up finding a beautiful teacher down in Brisbane that Danny knew through a school he'd coached cricket at, and he said, why don't you bring the kid down? And we took him down to Brisbane Grammar at this beautiful big private school that had such culture and history, and they were amazing, Maritza. They said to him, we know you've made mistakes, but we're not interested in the mistakes. How's this for a question? We want to know what you learnt from those mistakes.
Brilliant.
And he sat there and he said what he learnt from them, which was so beautiful. And then they said, we'd like to offer you a place at this school because we know we're not perfect, Jacob, but we just want to know that people are willing to learn from those mistakes.
Incredible. And I think for a schooling system, I mean, some kids just don't mould into the traditional schooling system, and it just hasn't changed in such a long time. So, one of my kids just doesn't enjoy school at all as well. And it's that because she just doesn't fit a mould, and sounds like Jake was the same. So there needs to be people like that, positive influences like that. I think we've all probably got one teacher in our lives that either said something to us that stuck in a negative way or said something that stuck with us in a positive way, right? But when we can be those mentors for people, regardless if we're teachers or mothers, just with people in general, imparting our wisdom can feel so incredible, but can exactly be that thing that people need at that time. There are how many podcasts out in the world? A lot of them have similar conversations, say the same things, but sometimes when it comes from a particular person and you're listening to that and it hits right at the right time from that person who totally understands it in the right way, like it did when you were telling Jake, that's why we do what we do, right?
You did right, and I'd been trying to tell him these messages of love for years, but it was me doing the work to then be able to articulate it. And then also, here's the real key, when we do impart our wisdom, not having an attachment as to whether it's received, wanted, or acted upon. Because if we have an attachment to that, then our egos come into it, or our clinching at trying to help or save. It's not. And I've always believed as a mother, most important thing to do is to not push my kids and not pull my kids, but actually walk beside them, because I'm doing it for the first time with them too. I've never been the mother of a 16-year-old boy and a 17-year-old girl in my mid-40s at that time, going through perimenopause. So it's all new. And if we could just grasp that too, none of us are doing this for the second time or getting it as this is the dress rehearsal. It's ridiculous to think we should be anything other than perfectly imperfect or imperfectly perfect.
Yep, I agree. I want to talk about negativity, because you talked a bit before about self-care and making sure you're bringing good things into your life, whether it be what you put on your skin or what you eat or what you consume. And a lot of the time our world just presents so much negativity. How do you shield yourself from that, or do you shield yourself from that? I mean, for example, I don't watch the news anymore. I haven't watched the news since 2020. Hint why. But, and I feel like every time I switch it back on now, I'm like, oh, absolutely not. Like I almost have a bit of an anxiety panic attack, because I can read through the narrative of the way that the news is presented with that fear and shock and negativity, because I think you can present information in different ways, and the way that it's presented just doesn't sit with me anymore. So I want to know how you shield yourself or build your life around the negativity that can sometimes come up.
Well, remember what Grandma said. Sometimes it's the fear or the angels, we only hear them when we get scared or frightened or we're in a moment of despair or we're not feeling great about ourselves. And we also have to remember that humans are wired for fear, to be we wake up or we listen or we intently become involved or find ourselves in the drama of it all. But that is a survival mechanism. We were always, you had to check the caves, you had to check if there was a tiger after you had to check. And where we used to calibrate away from that is that beautiful neurological shake it off. If you watch an animal in nature that's chased by a lion and it gets away from it, if you watch any nature program, within the minute it knows it's safe, it does this shaking thing. Now, we don't shake it off. It becomes part of our neurological makeup and we start getting more fearful. So I've seen the news since, and I've watched it, and I now look at it knowing the agenda, or knowing that there is a narrative that's fed to all news platforms, not all, but a lot of them, and I actually get to smile at it now, or I try and turn it in. I think humour is a wonderful way to navigate fear, in the sense of when you understand it, you don't have to have an attachment to it or tell people they should or shouldn't do something, and just know that it's a part. Now, some people feel safe watching the news, so I don't want to take that away from them, but I also know that they're probably not going to want to hear some of the things that you or I would want to say. They wouldn't potentially listen to this podcast. So I've worked it out for me, and again, I don't know if this is right or wrong. There is very little truth out there. It's just what we perceive to be true, that the right people will hear it at the right time. And so anyone listening to this with great wisdom, you end up siphoning it to meet your belief system. And I've always sort of said things like, I don't ever want to say that even what you and I say is right or wrong. It just is. It's just where we're at right now. But, some people would say, my husband's had an affair, or my wife's had an affair. This is the worst thing, and da-da-da. And I go, well, why is it so bad? Like really, undress this. I know it's not good, but why is it so bad? Well, we got married. We made vows. And I said, right, so we believe in monogamy. Is that what you're saying? They go, yes. And I said, isn't it interesting? Because if you were brought up in the United Arab Emirates, a man can have 4 wives. So you would not see that as him having an affair. He has 4 wives. Now, how do you sit with that? And they go, I don't like it. Well, of course you don't. But if you were brought up in the UAE with that narrative growing up, you would believe that to be true. So then I start going down the rabbit hole of what the frick is true anymore. I don't know what's real anymore.
What's true for you. Yeah.
And I just know that when someone's passionate about a belief, probably the biggest learning I took from 2020 was whether we believed in, let's say it, being vaccinated or not vaccinated. There's an extreme belief value system here. So when I really strip it back, actually, what did both want? They both wanted the same thing: safety and to be healthy, and to know that they were safe from this disease that was supposedly really bad. So when I understood that both ends of the spectrum wanted the same thing, I think anything at a real extreme left or right view is going to compromise the ability to see another viewpoint. And so I've always tried to teach, come back into the middle. I'm not saying you should be in the middle, because then that could just create blandnicity, another new word. But if you do have a belief system or structure, as someone said to me, I love this analogy too, when I was writing my second book, like an apple a day. I'm not a nutritionist, so he said for me it's really important you keep one arm around the trunk of the tree, but don't go out too far out on a limb, because you'll get crucified because you don't have the qualification. Even though you walk and talk the truth of what it is to you, and you're probably more educated around nutrition than even some nutritionists, because they're taught a narrative. He said, for your sake, knowing how much it means to you to not get hurt and you want to do good work, then don't go so far out on a limb. So the same viewpoint, whatever your viewpoint is, just know that you're only looking at it through your belief structure, your perceptions, your values and your understandings. But there is others. And that's where sometimes we have epiphanies or wake-ups or things we can't unhear, because all of a sudden we've been opened up to another viewpoint that actually maybe that is right. So when people would ask me questions about the vaccine through that time, I would honestly say, I can't give you an answer. I don't know if it's the best thing out. I don't know if it's the worst thing out. For where I'm sitting, I have this viewpoint, but again, I'm open to being educated. So yeah, I just think
it's so
really
powerful to be able to see things from other people's point of view. And a lot of people don't tend to think to do that. They're just so, like you said, so passionate about their point of view and that deep feeling, knowing that they are so right.
And I'm just not willing to fight with those people.
Yeah. So
I just let it go.
Me too.
I just go, wow. And here's 2 words that have saved me throughout life when I don't agree, or maybe I'm not sure yet. It's just whenever they're at me or saying something, I'll just go, that's interesting. Because it's interesting that you think like that. It's so interesting. But it's good. It diffuses it.
It does.
Because I'm not getting hooked, and you're also not going to get out of me what I think, because there's no point.
Yeah, and it's not our job to change people's minds, like you said. It's people are allowed to think what they're allowed to think, and people press play on this podcast when they're ready to hear it, and the words will inspire them when they're ready, if they're ever ready, and it's all okay.
And some people aren't and never will be.
Life feels so chill when you think like that, doesn't it? I reckon I could just kick back now.
It's so healthy. It's healthy when you're a teacher or an educator like me. When I have different people arrive into any of my programs and they've got these viewpoints, I just keep saying, that's interesting. You know, it's beautiful.
I'm trying that line. That's interesting.
When my teenagers were at me, you know, yeah, it's not fair. Why don't you let me go to this party? Or why can't I do this? I find that really interesting. I understand your viewpoint, and it's really interesting that you think like that. My job right here at your age is to protect you and to create boundaries. And this is the boundary. I hate you.
That's brilliant. I wish I had heard this last night when I had the 50 text exchange from my daughter asking me to do something, and I was like, nope, please, no, please, come on, no. I should have been like, I'm using Kim's words here and I'm shutting this right down. I hear you, you are heard, but no, thank you, this is interesting.
And my job is to protect you.
And my job is to protect you.
When you're 18...
Yeah.
Or when you move out of my home, more so, because
Yeah.
I still felt under my house, my rules kind of thing. Just like I've always said to my kids when they didn't agree with what grandparents said or didn't say, their house, their rules, you know, but it's your choice. When you leave home, you become the independent.
So we're not perfect either. We're not saying that, right? So I think there's ways in which we can learn to, and I think you touched on the perimenopause and the menopause thing a little bit earlier, and we can go off the rails sometimes too, all of us. And I think the word self-regulation has been coming up a lot in my world lately, and it's conversations that I've had with friends who are in relationships, and there's been blow-ups, or there's, you know, raising kids or partners, whatever it is, that we can blow up sometimes. How do you offer advice on how to self-regulate to keep ourselves balanced, especially as the hormones, you know, weave and dip as we get into this stage of our lives?
I think when I was young, my mum always said, you know, if you're going to say something bad, you know, count to 10 before you say it, or, you know, get outside before you come back at it. It's very hard when there's a saying, when emotions are high, intelligence is low. So we may know this, but when we're really emotive, that might all go out the window, and I think apology is one of the greatest of life's gifts. To be able to say, sorry, I lost my cool, or lost my shizzle, or I lost myself. I'm really tired. I need to own it. I could have said it better. I shouldn't have said it that way. I think an apology is one of the greatest of all, most beautiful human traits, followed by forgiveness. When we can forgive, and there's a beautiful quote, and you may need to hear it a couple of times, but forgiveness is the scent the violet emits onto the heel that crushed it. Forgiveness is the scent the violet emits onto the heel that crushed it.
Wow.
And I've never forgotten that either. And I think it's just remembering that, yeah, we can still be hurt, we can still be really crushed by whatever's happened, but we're all human, and we're all doing the best we can with what we've got. And some people just aren't that great at times. And so I guess for me is realising, first of all, that we're human. I am an aromatherapist, and so for me, my oils have always been my go-to tools, and smell is very closely linked to emotions. So I do snort lavender at times. I'll walk away.
Put it in your eyeballs.
I'll do anything, I want to take that thing in. But it's through the power of inhaling a calming oil like lavender, or like Roman chamomile, or any oil that you love, or any smell you love, just taking, and it's probably more also coinciding with it regulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So when we're in sympathetic dominance, our fight or flight system has come on. It's a protection mechanism. We're in that state. But to get back into the parasympathetic, which is the shake it off, the come back to rest and digest, that's why I love taking out an oil, or even visualising, smelling a beautiful rose, smelling lavender, taking 3 deep breaths, And that is one of the most powerful regulators of all.
The breath.
It's also one of the hardest to navigate when we're feeling so emotional, but it's not when you practice it. So it's, and in my head I'll be going, and I'll tell you the other thing I do is I literally put my tongue between my teeth, so I bite my tongue. Bite my tongue. You've heard it, bite your tongue. Do not say it, bite your tongue.
Right.
So I literally in my head take a nice deep breath and bite my tongue, and it's my anchor to remind myself not to react. I need to take a couple of deep breaths so I respond rather than react. And I think that has been one of my greatest tools. Not always perfected it. You know, Jacob sent me a video literally yesterday. It was a 9-year ago memory that came up for him, the brat. He's now 26. He sent me this video of me in the kitchen. I'm cooking, and it's me on video going, how did I say it? I just think you're incredibly lazy, Jacob. And and I walked back, and I'm trying to cook dinner, and you can see I'm so pissed with him. I think you're incredibly lazy, Jacob. And he played it to me, but I thought I said, I think you're incredibly amazing.
Oh, that's what you wish you had have said.
And then I went, wow, I was pretty amazing back then. But I said, then he goes, no, Mum, you said lazy. And I went, oh, sorry.
It's very easy to feel that anger when you're like juggling 12 things. You're cooking dinner, you're picking up people, you're cleaning a mess, and then your kid's just sitting there like lying on the couch on their phone, and their room's a mess, and there's probably
all the brats film you.
And then they're filming you on top. It's very easy to lose your shizzle. So like physically biting your tongue, yeah, that might be the key. I love that.
Breath, inhalation of an oil or visualization of a beautiful flower. It literally, as Dr. Libby Weaver said, you cannot help but deregulate, or regulate, should I say, deregulate the emotional response, breath work. And the other thing she adds to it is gratitude. So when we say 1 to 3 things we're grateful for, so this is not something to laugh at, but when my son lost one of his best mates, killed in a hit and run accident. Again, another thing I can't unhear is his mother saying, spoil your children, you don't know how long you've got. I'm also very grateful for the fact that I have my children, that I'm able to be angry at them, that I'm able to lose my shizzle with them, that I'm able to be grumpy and be filmed by them and them being a right little brat. I'm so grateful. And so I think sometimes the big knocks in life also remind you that, another thing Grandma said, darling, whenever you get upset with your children, just remember, if you're going to laugh at this within 1 to 5 years, it's not that bad. So even, Jacob being asked to leave school, at the time it was our world. It felt like the worst thing ever. But now I look back and go, wow, he just gave me a lot of content. And we did laugh at it. And we did not laugh in the sense that it was not something that was important, but we laughed at some of the responses of teachers or responses of the other pupils and things like that. And now it's like, you know what? You ended up doing even better. You got to you lived out your dream of playing GPS rugby. So I think there's always going to be, and if we all stood and looked at our timeline of life, the hardest things we've been through, I'm sure you could do this too, beautiful. The hardest things we've been through, we can look back now almost with gratitude, almost with, well, I actually wouldn't be where I am now had that not happened, or I wouldn't have married this person had that happened, or I wouldn't have built this business had I stayed in that job. So maybe, it's hindsight is a wonderful thing, I get it, but when you're in the throes of despair, challenge, or massive mosh pits of life, we do know that we will get through it, and there is another side to it. And as hard as it is, just think that when you're going through it. Now, it might be a year, might be a month, might be 10 years. Even now, at 20 years, Danny and I said it the other day, would we have moved to Australia had Zara not died? And we actually sat there and looked at each other and thought, maybe we wouldn't have. So then would my daughter have met her future husband, who's this gorgeous Australian man? Like there's sliding doors.
Yeah.
So sometimes those crack you open moments are actually there, as Grandma would say, for the angels to guide you into a place you never knew was coming.
how good is grandma?
Ah,
And how good is gratitude? I know it's this overused word at the moment, but it is so true. And that mental flip. I think it was a couple of years ago I was whinging about having to make school lunches, and my friend said to me, and I said something about, I can't come, I've got to make school lunches. And he said, you get to make school lunches. And I was like, pardon? He said, you get to make school lunches. You have beautiful, healthy kids to make school lunches for. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to really enjoy making those school lunches. And ever since then, I think of that every time I'm making the school lunches. I still make my kids' school lunches. They're 16 and 13. Sorry. It's probably my friend's fault who said that you get to. But I think of that every single time now. I'm like, it's okay. It literally takes me 12 minutes and I'm making lunch for them. And in 2 years, I'm not doing that anymore because one of them's finished and there'll be one lunch to make, so.
Don't worry, I'm still making dinners and they're 26 and 27. So I put
yeah.
them in the freezer
You
and I take it to they get to. And you know what? That is the most beautiful reframe. Yeah. Everything can be reframed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're feeling tired, exhausted, hormonal, lonely, aggravated, hurt, then of course your response to the situation is going to have that lens. I remember one day, and this is another way to look at it, that my kids were fighting up the hallway. This was when they were young, and they were at each other, and I didn't know what they'd done, but I was tired and I was on the edge, and they were doing my head, and I walked down that hallway. What the hell, I lost myself with it. Later apologised. And then there was another moment that Jacob had gone into Taylor's room and tipped all her trophies over again just to wind her up. And she'd lost her chisel with him and she'd punched him and he had ended up, there was this whole thing. And I walked down, I'd had a great day that day. I can't remember all the things I just remember feeling really great that day. And I walked down there and went, hey, what's going on? Come on, you've got 30 seconds to tell me what happened. You got 30 seconds. All right, everyone done. You apologise. Let's get in the bath. Let's go. And I thought, it's not the situation. It's not the situation. It's who we are in the moment, whether we react or respond. And that's when I learnt the art of not only loving oneself, but also knowing that you've got to do this work. You've got to learn these things. Mm-hmm. We're not necessarily shown it or taught it at school. So this is learning what it means to be human.
If someone's listening now and they're like, I am so burnt out, I have no time for myself, I am exhausted, Christmas is coming up, I don't even know where to turn first, all of the work's stressing me out, I have deadlines, they have zero time for themselves. What advice would you give to that person who's at total burnout point right now? What are some first steps they can take in their self-care to make themselves feel a little bit better?
Well, let's first of all own the fact that we all have a choice. And so whenever someone says to me, I've got no time, that's just a belief, because we've all got 24 hours in a day. So first of all, I'd own the fact that I've got myself to this point because I could have worked it better. I could have managed it better, or potentially here's an opportunity for me to learn next time how to handle it better. So don't knock ourselves, but here's a great opportunity to learn. We also know the two biggest excuses in life for not looking after ourselves is time and money. So again, when I hear time or I don't have enough money, it's not that. I can tell you, it's whether or not it's a priority. So you just haven't prioritised yourself. That's what's happened. And so people will know me that this is why I book the gym 3 or 4 times a week. I book it because I know I could easily keep working and frazzled, but I know I'm a better person when I walk, and I'm a better person when I run, and I'm a better person when I go to the gym. So I literally have in my diary, those times are my times. Even when the kids were little, it would be, I would work out while they were getting ready for school. Like I would do it at home. I may not get to go to the gym, but I would do it. It would be a priority. So let's say the person's in burnout, they haven't had the ability to do that, they haven't understood that, they've lost themselves in the maelstrom of life. So right now, first and foremost, it would be own it. Surrender, lean into it, allow yourself to fall in a heap. I think sometimes when our kids see us at burnout or breakout or breakdown point, it's also really important for them they get it. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with showing people I'm done and owning that. And so then from there, what do we want to do? We also have to question, is there a secondary gain in being in burnout? So there's this martyrdom that women seem to own with a badge of honour, which is kind of like, is that it? So I just want to question it. Like, where and why did I get to this point? You know, it could be if you've got money, you could get a nanny next year maybe, or you could get more help, a cleaner, if you've got money or a choice to do that. Some people would make that such a priority that they would sacrifice going out for coffees to have a cleaner. So again, it's all, I'm not saying any way is the right way, but sometimes when we hit burnout point, it's an opportunity for us now, maybe over the festive season, to go, I don't want this to happen again. I don't want to be this person. I actually really need support. And I even coached a lady this morning who's left her husband, got 2 kids. And when she did one of my programs, she said, Kim, I can't fit in another thing. And I said to her, and she said to me this morning, do you remember, Kim, because she just graduated from one of the programs, do you remember, Kim, I said to you, I don't think this is another thing. And I thought, self-care is not another thing. It's actually the thing. Yeah. It is the number one thing. Because when we take care of ourselves, even what I call triple M's, micro moments of mindfulness, going to the toilet and spritzing yourself and taking 3 deep breaths, that's self-care. Walking outside for 10 seconds while the kids are screaming or they're in the bath or something, and putting your feet on the grass and just going, one day I know they won't be here, so I need to frame this. Help me reframe. Sometimes I've gone down to my beach and literally screamed at the top of my voice just to get that pent-up energy out. And sometimes it's just really important that when they've gone to bed, even though I can't be bothered running a bath, I'm running a bath. I'm putting some oils in there. And even if it's only for 5 minutes I'm in the bath, I've been awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, not being able to get back to sleep. And I go, all right, go and do a magnesium bath, because you might as well do something. And so I might as well try and calm. And then I get in the bath and I'm there and I'm going, how long do I have to be in here? So I'm not being present. So it's like, all right, just 1 minute, just take some deep breaths for 1 minute. I tell you what, it's not hard. The hardest part, like going for a run or going to the gym or running a bath, is that bit. It's the doing of it, the creating, putting the shoes on. But once you're out there, I've not met anyone who's regretted taking the bath, walking outstairs and putting their bare feet on the grass, going to the gym, or making themselves a beautiful cup of herbal tea, a coffee, or a smoothie. Like it's that bridge that is actually the game changer. Mm-hmm. It's the taking action and putting it into action. So, yeah, burnout, right here, right now, own it. Lean into it, surrender, fall into it. Maybe tonight it's takeaways.
Hearing you talk about those stories actually reminds me of a time where I had a big blow up in the morning with one of my daughters, and I just reacted in the crappiest way. I wasn't proud of myself. I was yelling and screaming and being the worst mum in my opinion. And I dropped them off at school, went to the beach, and I was just like, okay, I'm going to have my moment here to just like calm down. And I had this, put my feet in the sand. I love the beach. So I was calming down. I was sitting there and looked next to me, and there was a woman probably in her sort of early 60s. And she looked at me and she's like, have you had a bad morning, love? And I said, actually, yeah, I had a bit of a bad morning. Went home with the kids and sort of opened up a little bit. And I said, what about you? How's your morning? And she said, I haven't really told anyone this. My kids don't even know. She said, I've had a bad morning too. I've actually been sleeping in my car for the last 6 weeks because I've left my husband and he won't give me access to the house. And so we ended up having this open, deep, emotional conversation, and she really made me see things a lot differently. One little blow up in the morning, and she's dealing with a completely different, sort of much more serious situation that she wasn't able to talk to anyone about. And those moments of just opening up to people like that, I think, can be a huge act of self-care and self-love. Finding those people in your life that you can open up to. I know as a woman, I need to talk it out. Men probably don't need to talk it out as much as women, but when I find someone that I can have a conversation with about how I'm feeling, it really helps to identify sometimes too. When you talk about it, you identify what it is that's triggering you, whether you don't want to talk to anyone, you could journal it out too, but having people in your life where you can just vent in a way that's a healthy vent is really powerful too, I think.
I think that's also the power of the process.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's just processing our thoughts out loud,
Isn't
either
it?
in journaling
Yeah.
and potentially you don't have to be religious, but you may believe in something greater than us, and just asking for guidance. I remember I was so broken. My marriage at one point was nearly, I didn't know it was going to survive. My husband had really gone through a breakdown with the loss of his sister, plus we lost all of our money in a financial deal that went wrong, and that was really important to him. And we were just we were broken, absolutely broken. And I went down to the beach. There wasn't anyone on the beach, and I screamed so loud, sobbed so much. And then I turned around and went, well, if there's a God up there, if you're really there, where the hell are you? And I remember just thinking, it's bullshit. And even that primal roar coming from my gut, my soul, my heart. And then I turned around and I basically want to go to the world. And I turned around, and down at our beach here, we don't see many seagulls, but this day there were 9 seagulls that just flew right. I remember it so vividly, flew right beside me in this formation of 9. I remember looking at them, and then they landed, and I looked at them and I thought it was beautiful. But then as I was walking, started jogging again, they lifted, and then they flew another 20 metres, and I got to them, and then I looked at them and I went, is this a sign? And then I ran another 20 metres, and they flew another 20 metres, and then they dissipated up into the sky. And look, someone else could go, there was just 9 birds flying, whoop-de-doo. But at that moment, I felt like they carried me. It was so visceral. I felt it somatically in my body that they carried me, and I thought, I'm not alone. There is this greater force. There is something. I can do this. Just get into formation. Get back into order. Come on, you've got this. And I remember it so clearly. It's still to this day. And I've never seen 9 seagulls down on the beach again like this. I've never seen that many like that. And I just remember that day, that was my sign. And I read a book called Signposts, and it's so beautiful when you let go of the emotional human aspect and realise that struggle is a part of growth, that challenges are there to rip us open, that the stranger on the beach, now you can be grateful for throwing a tantrum with your kids. And I've always thought we are just basically 4-year-olds in adult clothing. Like, let's get real. We're all trying to do this. But just know life is there to teach us, expand us, and open us up if we're willing. And I don't think anyone listening to your podcast would be ready for that if they weren't a part of your world. And so I say, you listen to every guest. There's gems, there's something. I'm not sure what's come out of this one, but maybe you could even pass it on to someone that needed to hear something you and I have talked today. And that is the gift of what it means to be truly human.
Kim, what's something that you once heard that you could not unhear?
Well, there's lots that I've obviously shared today, but when I got into my ultra marathon running, that was a dare. Because I found it boring getting up all my log hours watching 40 athletes run around a 400-metre track. And I said to a gentleman called Cliff Young, who was the oldest participant to win the inaugural Sydney to Melbourne race of 1,000 kilometres, and he said to me, well, I was looking after him, this is boring. He said to me, what do you think of it? I said, it's boring, Cliffy. And he said, well, why don't you put your money where your mouth is and run one? I thought, yeah, rather run one than watch one. So I ended it. That's how I got into ultra marathons. And the very first, well, actually it wasn't the first 24-hour race, the thing he said to me, just remember, it's 90% mental and 10% physical. That's all you got to remember in this 12-hour race. And I won that and ran 95.5 Ks, and they gave me my trophy, which allowed me to run in the 24-hour championships. And the thing I've never unheard since is, because he came up to me at the beginning of that race, which I set a world record in, and it was to run for 24 hours, and he said, just remember this, Kimmy, the race is not always to the swift, but to those who keep on running. And so you don't have to be the fastest, the best, the quickest, the most extraordinary. Just keep going.
Thank you so much for your amazing wisdom today and everything that you've shared, and for being on the Things You Can't Unhear podcast.
My absolute pleasure, darling.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the show. What did you think? And what did you feel? Let us know by leaving me a message on the Things You Can't Unhear Instagram community page. And if you can, give us some ratings love on your favourite listening platform.